Welcome to everybody to the class from New Orleans, where outside it is unreasonably hot, but we're in a air-conditioned comfort in here. So I'm going to do just a little background. Besides doing Aikido, and I'm the chief instructor of Aikido of New Orleans, I'm a longtime anatomy teacher. I've been doing body work for over 40 years and acupuncture for over 25 years. And I teach anatomy and therapeutics for yoga teacher trainings and therapeutic yoga trainings. So it's kind of my background, and I always integrate my anatomical knowledge into teaching Aikido because they really support each other well. So I'm gonna yak for a while, I'm gonna talk for a while, and then we're gonna go downstairs to the real home dojo. This is not the real home dojo you're looking at. This is our former dojo space. And then towards the end, we'll open it up for questions. So let me share some vacation pictures here. I'm kidding. I'm not going to make you watch my vacation pictures. So getting back to training, that uke is me back when I was all young and springy. I think that was in 1989 in Russia. Self-care is to me, self-care is part of self-defense, especially as we get a little bit older. I am well past my 30s and 40s and 50s. I'm in my mid 60s, and training is different, and recovery in between training and preparing for training, it's all very different now than it was back when I was Mr. Bouncy Boy there. For us right now, there are three main factors that can contribute to injuries. One is that we've had much reduced Aikido movement over the past 16 plus months. Some of you may have been training this whole time. I know there are dojos that have had contact training this whole time. But for a lot of us, there's been not only reduced Aikido movement, but reduced movement in general with the lockdowns, being stuck on the couch, going from Zoom meeting to binging on Netflix. All that decreased movement comes into play and can start to affect especially our connective tissue systems. And we're going to circle around back to connective tissue in a couple of minutes. Another thing that can contribute to injuries right now is the absolute out of your mind excitement about returning to training. If you are in a place where you're able to start training, where the vaccination rates are up and the infection rates are down, and you're able to start contact training, the excitement is unreal. Over the first 12 months of the pandemic, I would often beg people, I'll pay you $50 if you nikyo me on each side, because I really wanted to feel that stretch. I really wanted to get all the tension of the last year and a half, wring it out of my body. But that excitement can lead us towards injury, especially if we start off where we finished a year and a half ago. And for some of you may be able to do that. Some of you, especially younger Aikido-ka, you may very well be able to do that. Some of us who have more mileage on us, we need to be a little bit more gradated, a little bit more gradual in how we come back to training. Just a little bit about connective tissue. Connective tissue is absolutely everywhere in the body. If I was to list everything that was made out of connective tissue in the body, it would be a very long list. The shorter list is to ask, where is there not connective tissue in the body? And that's only in a couple of places. The open space where food passes from the inside of the mouth through the esophagus, through the digestive, and all the way to the exit. And then also the open space within the lungs. The tubes, all those tubes and passageways have tons of connective tissue, everything from bone, fascia, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, even blood is a form of connective tissue. Even adipose tissue is a form of connective tissue. Adipose tissue is the fancy name for fat. I am not fat, actually, I just am. I've been working on developing my connective tissue at my hara for the last 16 months. And all of the connective tissue, all forms of connective tissue are connected to everything else. All the connective tissue in the body is completely connected to everything else. There is no separation between the fascia surrounding a nerve down in the toe to the connective tissue that's diving in and surrounding the brain and diving in and separating the two halves of the brain. And all of this connective tissue is changeable. It all responds to different stimuli and will change according to the stresses that it's put under. Connective tissue will change with posture, with heat or coolness. It gets a little bit more pliable when it's warm. That's part of the rationale behind doing things like Bikram or hot yoga to warm up the connective tissue. It changes with hormones, especially for women, the hormones that start getting secreted when you're pregnant, that relaxes the connective tissue to get you ready for the amazing construction project going on in the belly. The hormone is actually called relaxin. It relaxes all of the connective tissue. And we also can get changes in connective tissue, in particular in the fascia and in the muscles, the layers of connective tissue wrapping the muscle fibers and bundling the fibers into what we know as muscles. That connective tissue will change, and this is what we can use for us to our benefit by using low sustained pressure over a long duration. So getting into a stretch, the PTs call it low load, long duration. Low intensity, low to moderate intensity positions of stretching that we hold for a long time. And that time is part of the factors that can help us when getting back to movement. Time can also be a factor in creating difficulty in getting back to movement. This is Zumasana, we call it in, well, this year, it used to be laptop asana, but this is kind of the position that a lot of us have been hanging out in extensively for the last year and a half. It was already a problem for 10 years prior as the use of technology increased, our immobility also increased. And connective tissue, especially the fascia and the muscle, will change according to the shape that you're hanging out in. So in this seated position, for example, up at the base of the neck right here, all of this connective tissue at the base of the skull is going to shorten. Across the chest with the shoulders rolled forward, that's also going to shorten. Between the shoulder blades, it's going to lengthen. And our psoas muscle, one of our main postural muscles, is going to shorten. The hip muscles, the gluteus medius and the tensor fascia lata, the connective tissue integrated into those muscles will also shorten. So that when you stand up from this, you don't stand up into a straight position. Your body is still kind of holding that hunch, slumped posture. And eventually, if you hang out in these postures long enough, even the connective tissue that is bone can start to change shape. The vertebrae can start to get wedge shaped. And bone is a very slow connective tissue to change. It's a much more glacial than muscular fascia, but it can change and will change. And especially if you're in a place where, like, kids hanging out like this, and kids, their connective tissues are all real bendy. But if they're hanging out like this, you'll see it in their posture, even as they step away from the gaming position. Does that make sense? So the gaming position, when they stop the gaming position or the smartphone position, their body is still holding that posture. And you see it a lot also in like musicians. I can usually, if I know somebody's a musician, I can look at their body, I can look at their posture and tell you what instrument they play. This is a guitar player or bass player shoulder. This is very much a piano player's, classical piano player's posture. And this is more of a jazz piano player posture. You can see it in their neck rotation and violinists, because they're holding the instrument and staying like that for hours upon hours. So one thing to remember about all these things, about the connective tissue, about all the joints, about our bodies in general, is that motion is lotion. Movement is one of the best things we can do for our body. And, you know, I do know people who, over the course of the pandemic and the isolation and the lockdowns, I do know people who have lost weight. I do know people who continue doing very vigorous training, whether it's with CrossFit or yoga or whatever it is. I know people like that. I don't really hang out with them, but I know them, you know, and power to them. That is excellent. And we have to remember that Aikido movement is different than yoga. Aikido movement is different than CrossFit. And to get the Aikido movement back in our body, it really takes Aikido movement. And one thing, there's 3 areas that we can focus on as we come back into training. 3 areas where we can practice having control to avoid injuries. First is speed. Speed, quick movements can lead to quick movement injuries, like whiplash is a quick movement injury. Sometimes the proprioception, or the muscles, body, mind, self-awareness of where muscles are moving, if the movement is just too quick, it might not tear the muscle even, but it will cause pain because the movement was too quick. So to start back at a slow speed, and this is where practicing control really comes in. This is what we do in Aikido, right? Aikido is all about control. First, we're controlling our own body and learning how to move, how to get out of our shoulders and have good posture and move from our hara. Now, when we're coming back, controlling the speed and controlling the excitement of really wanting to fling somebody and really wanting to be flung at super high speed. Duration of training, gradually increasing the stamina. One of the principles that we use in therapeutics a lot is that as you start back from an injury or a surgery, if you were here at this energy level and activity level before the injury or surgery, and then you start and you try to go right straight to that, that's going to lead towards problems. You want to gradually ramp up, both with speed, with duration, and with the third area, which is intensity. Gradually ramp up so that we minimize the injuries in the coming back to the practice part. If we have setbacks, and sometimes we will have setbacks and injuries as we come back into training, we want to have those setbacks be minimal, right? You don't want to tear your psoas muscle because your hips have been flexed sitting at Zoom calls for 16 months. You want to, and I've done research, personal research on this, tearing your psoas really sucks. It's just a terrible injury. So by doing movements, by stretching our connective tissue with these low load, long duration techniques, we can keep moving and gradually get back to our full on, full speed koshinages. Oh good, we're at 20 after. Any questions so far? Anybody have any questions? You're welcome to unmute, or you can type a question in the chat. I just saw the question in the chat. Does that $50 offer for nikyos still stand? Mallory Sensei, for you, it absolutely still stands, but you just got to get down to New Orleans and I will pay you $50 for nikyo and then you can take me out to lunch with that $50.
Sounds perfect.
Excellent. Any questions so far? Nope. Okay. Don't be shy about asking questions. I do love questions. It's the teacher in me. So now we're going to go downstairs to the Real Home Dojo. Oh, I did see something. Oh, there's a question. Fascia is not connective tissue, but part of it. Fascia is a category, actually a subcategory of connective tissue proper. So connective tissue proper includes fascia, it includes ligaments, it includes tendons, all the fibery things that we usually think of when we think of connective tissue. So it's one of the categories within connective tissue, but also cartilage is connective tissue, bone is connective tissue, fat is connective tissue, blood is connective tissue. They all come from the same, developmentally, they basically come from the same source cell type, and then they develop and migrate into different things in different, I think of it like Bisquick. And if you don't have Bisquick in your country, in the States, Bisquick is this floury thing that you get in a box at the grocery store. And on the back, it has recipes for everything. And now I imagine it's a website that you can go to with recipes for everything. So if you take Bisquick and you mix it with water and milk in certain proportions, you get pancake mix. If you add a can of corn to it and change the proportions, you can make cornbread. If you add some gravel and ground up dirt, you can make bricks out of it. You can make anything out of Bisquick, absolutely anything. And connective tissue in our body as it develops is kind of like Bisquick. When you add mineral salts to it, like calcium, it can develop into bones. When you add really dense fibrous connective tissue, it can develop into ligaments. Whoa, ligaments, like the office supply store version of ligaments. So it's, yeah, fascia is connective tissue, part of connective tissue. I don't know if you saw it on the list for today's class. Get yourself a couple of towels. We're going to be using these. And if you have a tennis ball or lacrosse ball, some sort of, it doesn't have to be exactly that diameter, but if you have a sporting ball or a massage ball around the house, go ahead and grab that. So let's do a connective tissue stretch for our hamstrings. Since I am very tight in my hamstrings, I'm going to sit up on a couple of towels. Well, they're blankets actually. And I'm going to stretch my legs out wide. And actually, let me show you this from the side. As I stretch my legs out wide, if I'm really, really tight in the hamstrings, I'll be tucking my tailbone like this. And then if I try to reach forward, all of this is going to my back. I don't feel anything in my legs. So what we want to do in the hamstring stretch is try to get the pelvis to tilt forward. And for those of us who are really tight on the hamstrings, that may mean bringing the hands behind you, pressing down, lifting the heart, and trying to get your low back to arch. You want a little arch in the low back, not rounding in the low back. As you start to sit up, hopefully you'll feel it in the hamstrings and the backs of the thighs. Okay? And what you want to feel is towards the middle of the muscle, not so much towards the ends, but towards the center of the muscle. That's where you want to feel the stretch. If your knees are locked straight, that might be a little hard. You might need to bend your knees. You can even, instead of sitting up on that, you can even take a little roll and place it under each knee and then start to sit up. Now I feel my entire hamstring, the whole length of it, not just at the back of the knee. At the back of the knee, at the ends of the muscles where the muscle turns to tendon, if that's where you're feeling the stretch in any of the stretches, that's putting a lot of strain at the weakest part of the muscle. That junction between the muscle and the tendon is structurally, it's kind of the weakest part. So we want to get the stretch in the middle of the muscle. So get to, and for some of you who are already flexible, you may be able to come forward with the flat back. Some of you may flop your chest all the way down to the floor with a flat back. How nice for you. Go to wherever the stretch is for you. You know, we all know the folks who are really limber, who will flop their chest down to the floor and then go, oh my gosh, I'm so tight today. We still love you. That's okay. You can rock that vibe. But try to keep a little arch in the low back. For me, it's right about there. I can, sitting on the ground, I go a little less far forward than I did sitting up on a couple of blankets. So now we get to the place where we feel the stretch, mild to moderate stretch, and we're going to hang out here for a long time. How long, you ask? I'm so glad you asked. We're going to hang out here for at least 2 minutes. And what I recommend, and of course I don't have one right here, so I'm gonna try to keep my internal metronome going. What I recommend is actually using a clock to make sure that you stay at least 2 minutes in the stretch. The temptation without a clock is to stretch for about 17 seconds and then go, okay, that's enough. I'm done. I don't need to stretch anymore. But 2 minutes allows the connective tissue to gradually lengthen. And we don't want to bounce. We don't want to, pendulate back and forth in the stretch. That actually can make the muscle get more active. We want the muscle to relax and not activate that stretch reflex. And then it's almost like, if you can imagine, use your imagination here. If you have a piece of saran wrap, a piece of plastic wrap in your hand, and you pull it taut between your fingers, between your hands, and hold a steady pressure. As you hold it, you'll feel that plastic gradually start to lengthen. The stretch on it, the pressure from your hands will gradually lengthen that form of connective tissue. And we can do the same thing here with the connective tissue in our body. Always check in with your breath when you're stretching. If you're breathing like this and making a face like this, you're working a little too hard. These connective tissue stretches, mild to moderate sensation. And if you want to study, there's a whole part of yoga where they really focus on these connective tissue stretches. It's called yin yoga. The two main teachers that you can look out for if you want to look at their books are Paul Grilley, Grilley, I think, and Sarah Powers. And 2 minutes is a long time. So if you're in a yin yoga class, what the teacher will often do is, as you come into the pose, they'll start to tell you a story, kind of like what I'm doing. And I hope you're doing this at home. Do try this at home to get the story to help get your mind off of feeling the sensation in your hamstrings for 2 minutes. 2 or more minutes. I think we're at about 1.5 minutes, I'm guessing. Checking in with your breathing, check in with your jaw tension, with your face tension. And then when you're coming out of a yin yoga pose of this long sustained stretch, you want to come out a little slowly. It can give you a little bit of an achy sensation as you lengthen the fascia, lengthen the connective tissue. It's a short-term achiness that leads to a long-term benefit. So moaning and groaning, as you come out is completely appropriate, completely fine and completely appropriate. Another one for us to do, especially since we're doing laptop asana hanging out or Zoom asana hanging out, is to do a connective tissue stretch for the psoas muscles. The psoas muscles start on the front side of the spine and attach down way up high on the thigh bone, on the inside of the thigh. And they, in the books, it says that they draw the knees towards the chest. They flex the hip, right? They're a really important postural muscle. They help to maintain the nice arch in the lumbar spine. And they're a really big player in low back pain. I'm gonna just change my glasses here so I can see all. So for this psoas stretch, again, it's gonna be pretty gentle. I'm doing it with 2 blankets. I could do it with 1. But I do this stretch a lot. This is a really great counter stretch for all this sitting. Actually, I'm going to role model doing it with 1. This is going to be a super gentle stretch. So I'm going to sit up with my tailbone at the front edge of this blanket, folded blanket, and then come onto my back. And then I want to pay attention to how my low back feels. If my psoas is really tight, this might feel very pinchy at first. And I'm going to slowly straighten my legs out. And I can feel, because anatomically, I know where the psoas is. It's really right in the just lateral of the groin on the upper thigh, and then comes up all the way to the first lumbar vertebrae, sometimes the 12th thoracic vertebrae, on the back side of the organs, on the front side of the spine. So I can feel it. It's getting a very gentle stretch here. If straightening all the way out is pinchy for your low back, you can try this. Try bringing your feet down, lift your hips just a tiny inch, and then tuck your pelvis forward, and then set your hips down onto the blanket again. And then slowly straighten the legs out. If that's still pinchy, then don't come all the way straight. Maybe just keep the heels planted a little bit. If you're not feeling a stretch at all, you can lift your hips and slide your second towel or blanket or couch cushion underneath your hip pelvis, and then straighten your legs out again. And again, 2 minutes. If you think about the amount of hours that we spend sitting in front of Zoom, sitting watching TV, sitting eating, sitting driving the car, we spend a lot of time with our hips flexed to 90 degrees, but we rarely do the counter pose for that, the opposite movement of opening and lengthening the psoas muscles. So I've started my internal timer, which I hope is somewhat accurate. Another thing you can do, and this is kind of torture, is if you forget your clock, if you sing the song from that game show, and I forget the name of the game show, but bum 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 bum. One round of that song is 30 seconds. So you would sing it probably in your inside voice 4 times, and then that gives you about 2 minutes. And then that song is going to be playing in your head for the rest of the day. And I apologize for that. Checking your breath, checking your jaw tension, checking the tension of the muscle in between your eyebrows. It's got one of my favorite muscle names, the corrugator supercilii, because it corrugates the forehead. We're on our second round of singing that silly song in my head. Dun, 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 boom, boom. So that's about a minute. Key change, still breathing, taking the time to stretch. So one thing that for me in my 60s, that I know for myself that I have to show up for class early to warm up enough so that I don't get injured. And that includes warming up, doing stretches like this, doing movements, doing Shiko, warming my hips up, doing some rolls, all the usual warm-ups, but I usually need a little more time than the folks in class do, especially if I'm teaching kids class. I have to be really warmed up to teach kids class. Third round of the song playing in my head. And as we started back into doing more movement in class, I realized how much my body missed teaching kids. Like I was teaching three kids classes a week, and I do everything with the kids. I do the whole class with them. And as I started getting back on the mat and doing movement, I realized that was kind of the base of my conditioning. Doing kids class can be fantastic for conditioning, especially if you take the time to play with them a little bit. Boom, ba-dum, dum, 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 boom, boom. Coming out, bending one knee at a time, very slowly, can be very achy as you come out. Breathing, I'm going to press down with my feet, lift my hips a little bit, and slowly lower my hips down. Oh, and then straightening the legs out. And I want to try to not jump up out of this. So I'm going to roll to one side and slowly come up to sitting. There's another one that I won't show you, but I can just show you the position of it, and you can do it on yourself, is the stretch for the plantar fascia, the really thick band of connective tissue that runs from the front of the heel to the ball of the foot. We have something built into Aikido that is great stretch for that. And the plantar fascia, remember, connective tissue, all of it is connected to the rest of the body. There's no separation between mind and body. There's no separation between one body part and other body parts. There's a myofascial muscle connective tissue plane that starts at the inside corners of the eyes, goes over the top of the head, down along both sides of the spine, down through the hamstrings, through the calf, and into the plantar fascia. continuous playing of connective tissue. And one of the places where it tends to get bound up is in the plantar fascia. The other place is in the suboccipitals, the base of the skull, just below the skull, especially with the laptop stuff. So coming into this position where you tuck your toes, that's a fantastic plantar fascia stretch. And you can apply it. Remember, we want a mild to moderate stretch. So if sitting up in regular seiza is too much at first, take a little weight off, bring your hands forward, and hang out in that stretch for 2 minutes. Maybe this is fine for you, and you can come up here and hang out for 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Maybe you're really flexible and you can start to walk your knees forward while keeping your toes tucked. I don't know if any of you ever saw Arturo Sensei do this. He could get the top of his foot all the way down to the mat. It looked really strange. So wherever your layer of comfortable stretches, hang out there for 2 minutes. Let the connective tissue gradually open. So that's one approach that you can do, is to do low load, long duration lengthenings. So that's one approach, low load, long duration stretches, especially in the lower body. You can do the hips, you can do the outer hips, the piriformis, you can do the lateral hips, which is a little tricky to do. You can do like a Gomukhasana, can be great to get into the lateral hips, sitting with the legs crossed over. Some of us need some support under the booty for that. That's better. Now I can hang out like this, low load, long duration. I will show one other stretch that's really good, and this is really nice for Aikido-ka. I think you'll be able to see. There we go. So you're going to come supine, laying down on your spine, flat on your spine. And just kind of settle in, check in where you're at. And take both of your arms and sweep them up towards the ceiling and then up overhead. Now, if your shoulders don't let your arms come all the way to the floor, bring a pillow in above your head and rest your forearms on the pillow. You can have several pillows. You can bring in whatever kind of height you need. We're going to focus stretching into the sides of the body. So this isn't how coming all the way down to the ground isn't so important. So now you're making a long shape with your body. And let's go to the right first. Take the heels and baby step the heels over to the right. You're going to keep your body flat. So don't let the hip come up. Just keep your hips flat. Then take your hands, your head, and your heart over to the right. So now if you're looking from above, you would see your body is making a letter C shape. And I'm going to the right, so I'm stretching my right rib cage, the intercostal spaces. I'm opening up the space between the bottom rib and the top of the pelvis, getting the quadratus lumborum, really important, another really important postural muscle. And I can get into the lateral glutes, the gluteus medius minimus and the tensor fascia lata. Now, some of us, you will stay here, and this is really groovy for you. Some of you may want a little bit more, and you can take your left ankle and cross it over the right ankle. That's going to deepen the stretch a little bit. Some of you may also want to take the right hand and grab a hold of the left wrist or elbow and give a little lengthening traction. And we want to, again, find a mild to moderate stretch that we can hang out in for 2 minutes without, stopping our breath, without clenching our jaw, just a mild to moderate stretch for 2 minutes. And I'm already playing that silly song in my head. I won't sing it for you. I don't want to do that to people around the world. It's kind of cool. Coming into 30 seconds. I should let you know, I am going to be playing this song in my head all day. The things I do for Aikido. The low load, long intensity. Remember, time is your friend here. Time helps change the tissue. We're going to stop at 1.5 minutes so I can show one other yummy thing. Slowly uncross the legs if you cross them up. Slide the hands, head, and heart back to center. Walk the heels back to center and go ahead and bring your arms down to your side. I just feel in your body, you might feel like your left side is now longer than your right side. It probably is. If you were to get up and walk right now, you would probably walk with a limp. Kind of amusing, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to stay this way. We got to stretch the other side. So bring the arms up overhead again. Baby step the heels to the left this time, keeping the pelvis flat. And then slide your hands, head, and heart to the left until you feel that yummy stretch along the right rib cage, the space between the bottom rib and the top of the pelvis, the outer right hip muscles, the glutes. You may even feel it into the IT band on the right side. You may want to cross the right ankle over the left ankle, still keeping the body flat along the ground. You may want to take the left hand and grasp the right wrist or elbow and give a gentle traction out. You might not want to do those. You might just be fine with the mild, gentle side bend. We're going to hang out here for the same amount of time for about 3 rounds of our song, about 1.5 minutes. Breathing is always good. We're in our second round of the song. We've got about 45 seconds left. Notice if your jaw is tight, if your corrugator supercilii is working. Try to relax, let the body melt into the pose. Let time do its job. Dun, 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 boom, boom. Slowly uncrossing the ankles if you crossed them up. Walk the heels back to center. Slide the hands, head, and heart back to center and release your arms down to your side. And hopefully you're feeling a little more even from side to side. You definitely want to do both sides the same amount of time. I fell asleep in that position once, 20 minutes on one side. And when I woke up, I had to do the other side for 20 minutes. I don't recommend falling asleep in those poses. Bend your knees. Slowly roll over and come up to Seiza. So now we've loosened up the lateral hip muscles, and that's really good for our movement in Aikido, getting those side lateral hip muscles in the low back, the quadratus lumborum, really good for helping to get the power of the hara moving. One other thing, so we've been doing these low load, long duration stretches. Now we're going to do what's technically known as smooshing. So if we're going to use our imagination again, if this tissue right here, this is a bunched up muscle tissue. So we've been doing some stretching. You have to imagine this is a muscle. We've been doing some low load, long duration stretching to stretch out the muscle. But sometimes, especially if there's an injury or if we have layers of the there might be a scar tissue happening, or it might just be from posture where layers of the fascia are glommed together. The technical term is an adhesion, when layers that are usually slidable and glidable next to each other get stuck together. So when we have those adhesions, sometimes it takes a little help with smooshing to help free up these restrictions, these adhesions. And using a ball is a great way to do it. I'm going to come onto my back. I've got my ball. And since everybody has adhesions in this area, I'm going to point to where we'll do it. I want to go not right on the scapula, not right on the shoulder blade. I want to go between the shoulder blade and the spine, right in this valley of knots, right in here. And just about everybody over 7 has this valley of knots all in here. Okay, really tight area. The weight of our head coming forward for all the tech stuff that we do, that puts a lot of stress in this area and it gets really glommed up. So I'm going to come onto my back, not on the spine, not on the scapula, but right in between. So I'm going to take the ball, I'm going to tip away from the side, and I can use, if you're using a lacrosse ball, it's really hard. You can bruise yourself. You use your body weight, shifting towards the ball for more pressure, shifting away from the ball for less. Use your body weight so that when you lean into the ball, you get a good achy sensation, not pain, not sharp, nothing that takes your breath away, just like that good achy sensation, you know what I mean? So I'm going to tip away, I'm going to slide the ball into that valley of rocks between the shoulder blade and the spine. And then I'm going to slowly, right there, on a lacrosse ball, it's already right there. And I'm going to smush, meaning just leaning in, the pressure spreads the fibers, spreads the layers apart, and can help to free up adhesions. Whew. So that's part 1, is just direct smushing, steady smushing. Then I can also add some very slow movement. Also, the pressure is just where it has that good achiness. Right here, I'm shrugging the shoulder slowly up and slowly down, extending the smush. This is a technique that PTs will call pin and stretch. I can also take the hand that on the side that I'm smushing, I can reach it across the body. That's going to make the shoulder blade move away from the spine. And open up the smush zone a little bit. So the amount of time smushing in one spot, 10 to 30 seconds. This one you don't want to do for 2 minutes, especially if you're using a really hard ball. Tennis ball is much kinder and gentler than a lacrosse ball. All of my tennis balls have been taken by my dogs. So now I'm going to do another spot. Same side, I'm just going to go a little higher between the shoulder blade and the spine. Leaning weight for more pressure towards the ball. I could even open this arm out to the side, but that's too much pressure for me with this really hard cross ball. Are you still breathing? Breathing is always a good indication of intensity. If you're breathing like this, no. It's just like in Aikido. If you're breathing like that while you're doing a technique, you're tightening so much. In yoga, there's a great, one of the sutras says that the breath should be free and easy. And that's even while you're putting your feet behind your head, the breath should be free and easy. Okay, so there's lots of points. You could do much of that. It's better to underdo it than overdo it. So a shorter time, up to 30 seconds at first, maybe 3 or 4 points, and then see how you feel the next day. If you overdo it, you'll be really sore the next day. You can also do this down in the booty. So I'm going to tip my knees away, slide it into the outer booty, and then tip my knees towards the ball. And I might need to search a little bit. If you get a nervy sensation, move the ball. You might be on the sciatic nerve. Oh. And you can do it with the feet flat. You can also do it with this same leg crossed over. That's going to put some of the muscles in a lengthened position and give you more interesting stretch. Being still with the smooshing, I can also move with the smooshing. Okay, so we've done 2 shoulder, 1 hip on this side. I'm going to start to do the other side. I'm going to pivot around. And Brian Sensei, hate to bug you, but could you give me another time check, please? Are we at about 10 minutes?
We're at about 6 minutes.
6 minutes, time flies. So I'm doing the first smoosh. You can, as we're doing the second side, if you have questions, you can start to ask them while you're smushing. And I'll be able to hear if you're smushing too hard, if you're asking a question like this. So if you have a question, go ahead and ask. I won't be able to read it, so you'll have to unmute, or somebody can read it for you. Oh.
Feeling a lot of tightness in my inner thigh groin area.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's from sitting a lot, and I don't really have any good non-agonizing stretches for that. So do you have any ideas?
Yeah, good. So when you stretch it, do you feel the muscles getting tighter? Is that what happens?
Yes, and I can't even sit zazen, which is I guess it's kind of a problem. I can't get my knees down. I just feel so, I don't know if that's from sitting a lot for work or what, but something's going on.
Is sitting zazen the same as sitting seiza?
No, sitting like lotus.
Lotus, okay. Okay. So if you haven't done the second spot, do the second spot. So with that inner thigh muscles, the adductor muscles, I think I mentioned proprioceptors earlier. Proprioceptors are how we know, it's a special sense, how we know where our body is in space 3-dimensionally. And one of the layers of proprioceptors is called a muscle spindle cell. It measures how much stretch is on a muscle, right? So with the adductors, they can often be set really short. I'm going to come out to show this. They can often be set really short. So if you're doing like butterfly and you try to relax the legs down, you'll see or feel the muscles really working hard here. It's because the proprioceptors have set to a short distance. So one thing I suggest for that you can try out is to, one, get yourself up on a throne. So I'm going to bring a bolster in here. I'm going to sit up high. And I've got not only my 2 blankets, you might need a lot of props for this. I'm going to get 2 blankets on each side and make a big roll. One on each side. So what we want to do is get the legs to a position where that proprioceptor, where that stretch reflex isn't engaged. So now I'll get into butterfly, and then I'm going to wedge these in and relax the legs and see if I can turn off there. I can turn off the muscle activity. I could lean up against a couch here for this. I want to get these to experience what relaxation is. That short stretch reflexes, keeping them very active. So I want to find a place where it's really safe, where I can let go of the inner thigh muscles. And usually by bringing support in, that's really helpful. And for sitting in a zazen, the same sort of thing. When you're sitting cross-legged, bringing more height under the hips can be helpful. So sitting on a bolster or even higher, if you're sitting in meditation, you can sit on a zafu or even a little higher than a zafu, and then bringing some support under the outer knees so they can relax, so the inner thighs can relax. They just need a little support. And then when you start to find the way into relaxing, you can start to gradually find ways to get more, reset that proprioceptive length. So I hope that was helpful, both in terms of the, getting back to movement, and also for that adductor, the inner thigh question. Any other questions? It looks like we're right at time.
Hey, Arturo, that was lovely. I'm, of course, most worried probably about, as our students are getting back, knees, right? And that torque that happens. And, as you started in the very beginning, we've only been back on the mat for 4 weeks. And it's the excitement level, right? That's just going to torque that knee at some point. So definitely like the hamstring stretch you did earlier, I think is probably helpful for knees. What else in particular for knees would you suggest?
For knees, I was saying to take the same approach with lengthening the quads, where if you're sitting in seiza, sitting up on a support, elevating the hips so the flexion of the knees, so as the knee starts to flex and you're coming into seiza, you might not be able to come all the way where the heel is to the butt. You may need some support under the hips to let the quads have that low intensity, long duration stretch and gradually open up the knee fascia over time. And then to also do strengthening things for the knees. Horse stance is brilliant for the knees. Doing any sort of like Tai Chi movement where you're really dropping your center and getting the quads to work is going to help strengthen the connective tissue across the knees. And going slow, especially if you're changing mats, we had to close our dojo. We're going to reopen in a new space at the end of this month, and the mats are different. And so everybody's got to acclimate to how your feet move. And you got to be careful not to, if the mat is stickier than what you're used to, not to plant and turn your body, not to plant the foot and then turn the body without getting the foot to slide. So taking the time to acclimate to the new surfaces, if that's something that's happening. That's some good news for us here in New Orleans. We're sharing a dojo with since we closed our dojo, we're reopening in a shared space with a Shotokan school, Shotokan and Judo. And it's a lovely space, and we're really excited to be able to open back inside at the end of this month. It's been a stressful thing for those of us who had to close dojos. You know what I'm talking about. It sucks closing a dojo. It just sucks, and it's the opposite of sucking to be able to reopen in a shared space. Feels like a gift. Any other questions?
I do have a question for you.
Yes.
For long-term ikkyo damage in this shoulder, like the nerve here, so that my hand shakes after almost 4 decades of
ikkyo. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for how to work? I mean, I can just push in here and feel where it is.
Yeah. there's so much going on in the shoulder girdle there that the one stable joint for the whole shoulder is this little joint right here between the sternum and the clavicle. So there's so much mobility, and because there's so much mobility, it's really unstable. That's a balance that happens with every joint. The more mobile it is, the less stability there is. The more stability is, the less mobility there's going to be. So in the shoulder, what often happens is there can be scarring that affects the nerve bundle. There can be neuromuscular patterns that get locked in the body. You can try that pinning movement with the ball and you can lie face down and have the ball right in here in the pec minor area. This is one place where the brachial plexus, where the nerves that go down to the arm pass right through here. So you could try putting the ball here where you're face down and then doing a little bit of movement. Start really small. Do small in terms of intensity, small in terms of duration. Be gentle with yourself. And I don't know if you've gone to a PT or a good neuromuscular therapist or even an acupuncturist. All those
I've done before the pandemic, but it's been.
Yeah. Did that help? Acupuncture help?
It helped some, but
yeah.
I mean, even lifting a glass.
Yeah.
I noticed it, especially on the right side. I probably took it differently on.
Yeah.
Side isn't.
Yeah, and I can see that the rhythm between your arm and your shoulder blade movement is different on side to side. There's 17 muscles that attach to each shoulder blade to stabilize the shoulder. And the orchestration of movement to do a simple movement like raising a glass, it's a really complex orchestration of movement that gets thrown off whenever there's an injury. And then that rhythm being thrown off perpetuates. It self-perpetuates. And you often need a little help from a good practitioner. Where are you, Mr. Day?
Colorado, near Boulder, Aikido Center.
Oh, great.
But you'd be perfect, as an acupuncturist for me or whatever, because, know what we're going through.
Well, yeah. And you've got the Rolf Institute right there, though. You've got lots of good practitioners right there in Boulder. Lots of good practitioners in Boulder. I love Aikido Sensei. I absolutely, he blew me away. My first seminar, 3 months into Aikido, he just blew my mind. I was cranking on people in Swariwaza and knocking them over, and he came up to me and said, "No strong." And had me grab him, and he just went like this. See, no strong.
Right.
Whoa, no strong.
He's like my later years now.
Ah.
I started strong with the Wama.
Oh, yeah.
Arturo Sensei, when's the best time to do these? Is it better to do these slow stretches right before you practice, or should you do them like as a routine during the week before you go, or and warming up? So maybe
yes.
Comment on that idea.
The answer is yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, doing them both. One thing I will say is when you start doing these low load, long duration stretches, they can change your self-awareness. They can change your proprioception around a little bit. So at first, I wouldn't suggest doing it right before class because your body is going to be moving a little differently. Have a little time to integrate the changes in your connective tissues, to integrate with your awareness, so you know how much effort it takes to move your leg in a particular place. So I'd say a little bit before class, a little bit longer before class, yeah. Especially at first. Once you get used to the changes, then you can incorporate it, embody it on the fly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I want to say thank you all for coming and for your attention. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Brian Sensei, for doing these. It's an amazing thing. I got to come to my first one last weekend with Mallory Sensei. It was wonderful. Also, just want to say, you know, support your local dojo, support your dojo. This has been a rough period for dojos around the world, and we all need support, whether that's financial support or just your loving energy and your good vibes to your dojo, and you know, helping out the ways that you can. I really appreciate it. Arigato gozaimashita. Thank you so much, everyone.